All you have to do is read the last few verses of the book of Hebrews, and it says that elders are going to be judged on what kind of shepherd or overseer that we are. And that we have a responsibility. The responsibility is to watch for your souls. That doesn't mean we're down in your face about your business, but we're concerned about where you're going to spend eternity. And it is my, as well as the other elders' responsibility to help you live in such a way that when this life is over, you can stand before your Lord justified. We're not going to make you justified. We can't do that. But we can encourage you, instruct, and so forth. By the way, the word elder is used more times in the New Testament to describe the position or office, and it calls it an office, in the New Testament. There are other words that are the same person. Overseer. There are congregations that on their bulletin they list the overseers. They're the elders. Sometimes they're called the shepherds. Sometimes they're called the bishops. Sometimes they're called the pastors. All of those refer to the position to which I've just been appointed. Now, what do I think about this morning? I think that I'm taking another responsibility. But I want to add another word to that. A fearful responsibility. And I want to illustrate to you what that means to me. When our son Danny was a little boy, he joined the Cub Scouts. I don't know, maybe he was that tall. I don't know how tall he was. He was just a little squirt. With approximately 30 other boys in that den, or I think they call it that. And the leader of that scout den was a very fine gentleman, elder in the church, matter of fact. And he asked the parents that night if any of them would help him in that endeavor to keep these little 30 boys in line and busy. Peggy raised her hand. Okay. About the time they had their summer day camp where they left the town and rode the bus about 15 miles to the state park where they had archery and games and crafts and outdoor activities of all kinds. The leader had a heart attack. It wasn't necessarily severe, but all heart attacks are severe. But he called Peggy and said, "You're going to have to take over this year." Now, she knew about as much about taking over as I know about rocket science. She said she'd be glad to. Y'all know, right? She'd be glad to. He said, "But Peggy, you've got to find some man to help you control these little boys." She said, "My husband would be glad to do that." This is a true story. That was Army volunteering. So the Monday came and we all went to the parking lot in town to get ready to board the bus and go up there, and 30 little boys make a lot of noise. And they piled on that bus along with the driver and Peggy and myself, and we made the 15-mile trip. When we got to the state park, there were a lot of women there that are assisting in crafts and games and so forth. And I was given the responsibility of looking out for these boys and keeping them in line. Well, it went pretty well that day. And then about 2 o'clock, we boarded the bus to go back to town. When we got back to town, all these screaming boys got off the bus, and the mamas and grandpas and grandmas are all out there to pick them up. And they all got in their cars and they drove off, and then there stood a mama. She says, "Where's my boy?" "Where's my son? He didn't get off the bus." So frantically, we went around to the cars with the little boys in that haven't left. "Did you see little Johnny?" These boys said, "No, I haven't seen him." You getting the feeling that I'm having? I jumped in my car and I drove back to the state park. They'd already called the park rangers, and they have banded together in a group that was designed to search for lost people. There was a major river ran right through that state park. I joined them. I beat bushes. I looked behind trees. We didn't find him. The state troopers then called the Tennessee Highway Patrol, and they came out with their search and rescue boats, if necessary, to drag the river. Maybe he fell off into the river, and they went down the river and came back up in case the body was floating. I didn't join them. I'd be in their way. You know what I was wondering, folks? If they come back with that body in one of those boats, who's going to go down and tell that mama, "Your little boy's dead"? It's going to be me. I didn't know how I was going to do that. I prayed constantly. What's she going to say to me? I let my little boy go to camp for you to watch, and you didn't watch him. That true story illustrates how I feel today. I'm going to face the God of heaven as an elder in the church who has the responsibility of looking after the souls of the members of this congregation. And if I don't do it, I got to answer to the Lord. I think all of you in the room know that I had 3 children. They weren't models of perfection. When our oldest daughter went out on her very first date when she was 16, "You be home, Katie, at 11 o'clock and not a minute later." So Mom and I set up, and 11 o'clock came and went. Any parent know what I'm feeling? 11:30 came and went. It got close to midnight. We're still sitting there in the den waiting. And finally she came home. Do you know the very first thing that came out of my mouth when I saw her? What's the words? Where have you been? Why did I do that? Did I want to make her feel bad? Well, maybe. But what motivated me was she's my daughter. I love her, and I don't want anything bad to happen to her, right? Danny wasn't perfect either. We finally had to have a paddle made. He wrote his name on it and put a notch in it every time he got a whipping. He still has it, except he's got his boys' names on it now. Why did I spank him? Because I hated him? Because he was engaging in something that was detrimental to him, to the family, to his health? Because I loved him. Now, just like a father has to protect his children, elders have the same responsibility to the church. When I asked Katie where she'd been, she said, well, we just forgot what time it was. That didn't set very well. But you know, my motivation was good. I don't know what she was trying to cover up. Well, I did find out lots of things later. Parents have a wide network. Do you understand how I'm feeling this morning as an elder in the church? I've got another responsibility. And I got to answer to the Lord, not just some parent that maybe lost her son who drowned in the river. You want to know what happened to that story? No, he wasn't on the bus. A well-intentioned grandmother decided she'd drive to the park and pick him up and get him an ice cream cone. 5 hours later, we found out. Those were agonizing, tearful, prayerful 5 hours. That's how I'm feeling today. So sometimes elders have to ask, where have you been? Sometimes they have to say, well, you need to do this or you don't need to do that. It's not because we're gods. It's because we're fulfilling the responsibility that we have. That's the first thing I want to say to you this morning. I still got sinus drainage. The second thing deals with all of us. A church is not a building. It's a meeting house. The church is in this room. The church are those that are being saved. Acts chapter 2, it says that. The church is made up of people that are, present tense, being saved. This coronavirus, as you could tell when Leroy and Walter stood up here, has affected every part of our lives. Our jobs, our schools, our grocery store, restaurants, our families, travel, everything. And it's affected the church. Like Perry, a lot of congregations at the height of all of this closed down because some places they were instructed to do so. Other places they did it out of caution. And now they're trying to reopen. And there's something that's happening in Alaska, Florida, Vermont, and Ohio. Those that are coming back are only about 50%. Some are not coming back because they're afraid that they might legitimately get the virus and they don't want it. Very understandable. Others have decided it's a good time to quit. Christianity takes too much of my time. Folks, this church, every other congregation, is at a crossroads. We're at a crossroads. I told a group of folks last evening that 100 churches of Christ die every year. Membership in religious groups across America, denominational churches especially, they're bottomed out at about 9 or 10%. There are lots of reasons for that we won't go into. We're at a crossroads. Leroy mentioned this is the 175th anniversary of this congregation. And it's had problems in the past, but right now it is at a major crossroads. We are at a crossroads. Everybody in this room. We are at a crossroads. There are two roads we can take. One road, we can use this coronavirus and the fear or whatever goes with it as an excuse to quit Christianity. Some have quit, but they would tell me they haven't quit. And I ask, do you assemble with your fellow Christians to eat the Lord's Supper? No. Have you given as you've been prospered each Lord's Day? Well, no. Are you studying your Bible? Well, once in a while I read something in it. Do you pray regularly? Well, every time I need something, I will. You know what I ask? What more will you have to do to quit to be a quitter? This congregation has been struck hard in the last 30 years. So many members in this congregation worked at the big factories in Mansfield, and they all closed up and went somewhere else. We lost a lot of members. Are we going to take the road of being a quitter, or are we going to take the road of being a stalwart? Sometimes people say, I wish I could have lived in Bible times. I wish I could have lived in Ephesus, for example, where the Apostle Paul came and preached. Man, I would have been on fire for the Lord. The person that says that does not know what they're saying. Historians tell us that you can go to the area around Ephesus and you can still see the caves where the early Christians hid for worship. They even dug out baptistries. They were hiding. If you knew you were coming to worship this morning and knew you needed to hide in a cave over the hill there, would you be here? They were being arrested. They were being persecuted. And you know what Paul says in that 20th chapter? It wasn't read this morning, that part. But if Nathan had just read 2 more verses down, Paul says the time's going to come, and I'll paraphrase this part of it. There'll be false teachers that will teach things to draw some of the members of the church of the Lord Jesus Christ in Ephesus to follow them. Then the next verse, he said some of these people are going to be elders. The elders of the church of Ephesus. You want to go back to Ephesus? I read recently, and I mentioned this I think yesterday too. There are more members of the churches of Christ in Nigeria today than in the entire USA. In 1960s, the Churches of Christ were the fastest growing religious group in America, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. Now there are more members in Nigeria, in the heart of black Africa. And all you need to do is to pick up a national news magazine or paper. The countries north of Nigeria, which is, I think, about the size of the state of Georgia, is Muslim. And I got a letter this past week, from a preacher friend of mine who shared the letter with me, who came from a preacher friend of his in Nigeria. And I was going to bring that letter this morning, but I didn't want to take the time. But here's what it says. He says, Muslim militia armed men patrol the northern part of our country, and they kill every Christian they can find. They cannot meet in a public building. They hide in very secure places to praise God, eat the Lord's Supper, and fellowship. But the Church of Christ is growing in Nigeria. You know, we've talked about this, haven't we? I can remember as a little boy, preachers say, the time may come when we may get persecuted. Well, the time has come that we're not so persecuted, but we're facing difficult times. So we're at a crossroads. The crossroad is a road that you and I are going to have to take, one or the other. And what road we choose results in what's going to happen to this church. Now, this isn't a sermon this morning. This is free. We're at a crossroads. Now, as an elder now, along with Walter and Leroy, we're going to have to make some changes. And they may be uncomfortable at a time. We can debate all day long about the coronavirus and the response to it. But that takes second place, or third or fourth, somewhere way down the line. That takes second place to what we're supposed to be doing for the Lord. Second place. The Lord comes first. Now, as individuals, me, Kathy, all the rest of us. What road are we going to travel? Are we going to travel the stalwart road to the very end? Or are we going to use all of this problem world we're in as an excuse to quit our Christianity? We have a choice to make. Now, I want to share with you one more thing very quickly. Years ago, many years ago, in Old Testament times, there was a unique man. I don't know, I could characterize him by using some modern day examples, but still they're not perfect fit. He was a skilled military manager. America's had some wonderful military men when it came to warfare. But he was also a leader, a political leader. We've had presidents who've been military men. He was responsible for the army that invaded Palestine after the children of Israel left Egypt. His boss, immediate boss, was Moses. His top boss was God. And he did things right. Well, he wasn't perfect. And then it came time for Moses to die. And Moses said, God, who's going to take my place? My brother Aaron? No. God said, not Aaron. Aaron's too much like most of us are. He's a little wishy-washy. I want Joshua to be the head of the nation. So Joshua, the army commander, became the head of Israel, the physical head here on this earth. And he led the children of Israel into the promised land. He divided it up just like God had instructed. He did everything right. We need to admire Joshua, folks. Too bad a lot of more boys that are born aren't named Joshua. And then he decided, I'm not going to be around much longer. And he called the elders of the people and a number of the people together between two mountains, a natural amphitheater. And he stood on the peak of one of those mountains, Mount Gerizim, and he talked to the children of Israel. And he explained very quickly how God had delivered them out of Egypt and had blessed them with manna and quail while they're in the wilderness. God allowed them to take over this land flowing with milk and honey. In other words, had a lot of houses, nice agriculture. He said, God's blessed you. Now, he says, just what I said. You're at a crossroads. Are you going to serve the God of heaven? Or are you going to serve the idol gods? Remember those famous words? Choose ye this day whom you'll serve. Gave them a choice. The God of heaven or the idol gods. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. This whole world's going crazy, folks. Society has accepted things that has been condemned for thousands of years. The world's going crazy. How will you answer Will you answer like Joshua? As for me and my house, we'll serve the Lord. And I want you to know what else that says. Excuse me. The individual who wrote the latter part of the book, we do not know. But it says that the nation of Israel remained loyal to God as long as Joshua lived and as long as the elders who knew Joshua lived. You want to make an impact on this church 80 years from now, if the Lord's going to let it stand? Your decision today is going to be what makes the difference. Daddies and mamas, you can make a difference in your children. Grandpa and grandma, you make a difference in your children. And I read an article that was truly astounding to me. The author of the article was a man I did not know, but I knew of him. He said, we talk all the time about the influence of mothers and fathers on children and grandparents on their grandchildren. But he said, I want to write about something else. The impact for good that members of the church have on folks. I've heard in this congregation people get up and say, well, remember brother so-and-so or sister so-and-so back 50 years ago? And they talk about something good they did. Folks, we're at a crossroads. Which way are we going to go? Going to be a stalwart or a quitter? Well, we're going to offer the Lord's invitation right now. And if someone has a need that they want to share with this congregation, come down the aisle, let me know. So if you need to respond to the invitation, do so now while we stand and sing, please.